Thank you for joining us. You may have read a piece I did some time ago about the Office of Regulatory Management. It all started with a conversation I had with my friends at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. And since then, I've been put in contact with the director of the Office of Regulatory Management, Reeve Bull. He is here with us. And Reeve, thank you for taking a little time out with us. But more importantly than all that, thank you for being what is now commonly referred to as Virginia's DOGE, and maybe not without the fanfare and the flourishes of Elon Musk, but take us into how the Office of Regulatory Management works, how many people are involved, because my editor at the Daily Signal is like, so now hold on, people voluntarily cut back on their departments, and it just didn't seem to make it work. So how do you make that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me on, and delighted to take some time to talk about our Office of Regulatory Management here in Virginia. So we're very lean and mean. We're a staff of only four people,
Cool. That's
and
it.
yes, sir,
Wow.
exactly. Yeah. So small but mighty. We have
I guess
basic.
it would be ironic if the Office of Regulatory Management had like 200 or 300 people working on it. So
Right.
that wouldn't be
That
great.
would, yeah, gotta be a little bit in tension with kind of some of our goals. But yeah, no, we're four people, and I'm the director of the office. My predecessor was actually Andrew Wheeler, who was of course, the EPA administrator during the first Trump administration. And yeah, the governor basically created our office with the goal of making the regulatory process in Virginia as lean and as efficient as possible. Um, a lot like what we're now seeing at the federal level, what the Trump administration is doing. And we were created with the goal of cutting regulations in Virginia, regulatory requirements by 25%. Um, that's a goal that we will actually reach in the next few weeks. Um,
Congratulations.
Absolutely, yeah. It's exciting news. It's actually a little bit before we were anticipating. So we're gonna get to the finish line about 6 or 7 months early, and I think we'll actually kind of push through the finish line too. We don't have an exact number yet, but I think it'll end up being well over 25% in terms of requirements cut.
It's all good, and in a dear friend of mine is Wayne Cruz, and he writes an annual report called the 10,000 Commandments Report because we started out with just 10, now we need 10,000, and it's always about regulatory reform with him, and he puts the chalk to the federal regulations and the registry that adds so much cost to anything, and to see it manifest in Virginia. Talk about that cost savings to a small business. We hear people say, "Oh, we won't raise taxes on anyone who makes more than $400,000 a year," but that's a lot of S corps and that's a lot of LLCs who come through their proprietors' tax returns that are going to see higher taxes, higher regulation, because each one of those is a job. I have to imagine, isn't it, Reeve?
That's absolutely right, Joe. And I'm happy you mentioned the small business effects of this because that's something that the governor was very, very mindful of at the outset.
Hmm.
And that's really been a focus for us throughout the process. So overall, our savings are about $1.2 billion with a B
Wow.
in terms of the total savings, 1.2 billion per year, actually. So
Hmm.
that's an
Hmm.
annual savings, and a lot of it is being enjoyed by small businesses. And I think a big part of the reason why is that regulatory burdens, though they may be uniform in terms of how they apply, it's a lot harder if you're a small business. I actually have some personal background with this. My father's a plumber, and he, does his own work. He has his own, small
Yeah.
company. And for people like my father, the regulatory burden can often be crushing. It's very, very difficult to navigate these complex regulatory codes. it's not easy for a large business either, but they can usually hire, counsel to help them figure it out.
Or they may fold it in. We were told about that during the 2008, 2009, the Obama years, that each one of these regulations harms the small business disproportionately because to take your dad's business, Michael and Sons has a big accounting department, certainly bigger than a guy with a truck full of plumbing tools has. So they can kind of just fold it in and say, "Hey, John, can you handle this extra paperwork?" Whereas your dad is going to have to either shutter what they do, and we see this. We see this with businesses either cutting back or closing altogether, and it hurts the Virginia consumer because there are fewer choices, therefore higher costs, doesn't it, Reeve?
Precisely. Less competition. And that's where, we think if anything, the 1.2 billion is direct savings, but we think there's a larger savings, associated with the market dynamism. This creates,
Mm-hmm.
make it easier for businesses to navigate the process, make it easier for them to hire people. And if you do that, I think that's absolutely right. It has a pro-competitive effect that it expands the market. And it's really hard to put a number to that, but
I'm
I think
sure.
it's huge.
Well, as somebody who started a small business myself, post Governor Youngkin's administration, I can tell you, after finishing my application on the State Corporation Commission website, I looked at my wife and I said, "That can't be it." And sure enough, our business license arrived in the mail, and our everything was there. So it is remarkably easier than I think somebody in my position would have expected. What about these? Is it just a Virginia thing? Is it the peanuts? What is it that makes these agencies want to self, well, not self-reduce. Oh, yeah, maybe self-reduce to put themselves through this, to cut them, because as my editor said, it seems counterintuitive to think to somebody say, yeah, you know what, I have too much of a budget. Why don't you cut what you're giving me by 25%?
Sure. Yeah. No. So, and to be honest with you, when I first started, that was kind of a concern, that I had because you're asking them to, cut back. But,
Hmm.
I want to put a plug in for our, fantastic Virginia agencies where they have really bought into the process. And I think part of it is that they are seeing that this red tape it's obviously harmful for citizens and businesses, but frankly it's harmful for the agencies too. It makes it a lot harder for them to do their job. They have to maintain these out of date codes or guidance documents. In some cases it's confusing. They're finding that it actually makes it a lot easier for them to do their job too, if they
Interesting.
really focus in on making sure that the code is as streamlined and as clear as possible. Makes less work for them. What we're also seeing is that they get fewer inquiries that way. Their goal at the end of the day is to make it easier for people to comply with these regulations. If it's
Hmm.
clear and straightforward, then it might take more time on the front end, in order to do that cleanup work, but it probably actually saves some time on the back end in terms of not having to field calls and having a regulatory code that is a lot easier for both the public and the agency officials themselves.
Reeve Bull is on with us. He's the director of the Office of Regulatory Management. We've discussed here, kind of taking us on a guided tour, so we get the story from inside. And Reeve, I appreciate you taking some time. Just this week, Amazon Web Services, big announcement, big investment, big facility, big numbers of jobs. But those are the ones that catch the attention of the news departments, and they send out the camera crews to go on and get a picture of the governor, cutting the red ribbon. I notice you have a ribbon cutting on the screen behind you. Um, but talk about is there a feel for how much this has helped small businesses get started? Do we have a number? I know Virginia is now starting to finish first more frequently in the best states for business, but do we have a feel for, because I see places like Richmond and Martinsville and places like that could really use a lot of small businesses with some empty storefronts and things like that. Can you quantify how it's helping?
So, I think definitely I can, give some examples of, where it's helped specific businesses or specific practitioners. I think that one example I could give is in our professional licensing space, where we've looked at basically what process you have to go through to become a barber, or an electrician, or a plumber, and these are like in my father's business's case, oftentimes individual people or really, really small businesses. And we've significantly sped up the amount of time that it takes to get a professional license. We've cut it by, I think, over 70%, at least our
Wow.
Department of Professional Occupational Regulations. And what we've also done is actually change the burdens in some cases. So, for instance, a cosmetologist in the past, you had to get 1,500 hours worth of training in order to become a cosmetologist. And we took a look at that and said, you do need some training, but 1,500 is way too high.
Mhm.
So we were able to cut that back to 1,000 hours. And, we're comprehensively looking at various professions. We're also doing things like universal licensing, where if you're coming in from out of state, you can just basically get a Virginia license
Mhm.
based on the certification you got out of state.
And
I
that's
don't think
helped with in the medical profession has it. Last time I talked to the governor, I think we were talking about nursing especially and that regulatory reform.
absolutely, and I think it's very helpful for the practitioners themselves, and then it's also very, very helpful for Virginia citizens because in some of these areas, and you mentioned nursing in particular, it's an area where there's a real shortage. Where we need to hire more people.
Hmm.
And so, to the extent that you can expedite the process, obviously still leave the protections in place, but make it easier, make it faster, then it benefits those practitioners, but it benefits the broader public too by helping to alleviate some of those critical shortages we have in our labor force.
So as I understand it, the Office of Regulatory Management is now a permanent part of Virginia's government. So whoever takes the reins in January of 2026 is going to have this department. Is that written in code? Is that something that can't just have the next governor come in and say, no, 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 I don't want to do this? Talk about these protections and what the legacy is going to be in the years going forward, Reeve.
So yeah, it is. It is a. It's in the. It's not in the statute.
Okay.
We were created by Executive Order 19. But in terms of the savings that we're achieving, those are things that will be renewed,
Mhm.
every single year, 1.2 million. The next governor, it will be his or her decision as to, whether sort of what the nature of the office will be. But yeah, we were created by Executive Order 19.
So would it be something worth asking? We have 100 seats in the General Assembly up for election this year. Would it be a worthwhile question to ask these erstwhile delegates, incumbent or not, whether it would be something they would be interested in memorializing into the code so that the office is always there working towards keeping Virginia's regulations low? Or is it something that once a mission has been accomplished, it can stand down?
So we would certainly be supportive of something that created an office via statute. I think there's some certainly uh, major benefits in terms of having an office that can continue to work with agencies and ensure that these sorts of reforms are getting implemented. So, if
Okay.
that's something that the General Assembly decides to take up, then I think it's a concept that I think has proven itself and is provided significant value.
Oh, I know that, some of my friends like Senator Deeds love to talk about how are you going to replace the money. But it certainly seems like your office has, found that magic formula where, more business activity means more people working, less people needing help, but also more people paying taxes, plus less money being spent. It seems like a real win-win. So when you talk about $1 billion saved, it's easy to imagine that you could have created almost that much, if not more, in economic activity going into the budget, and I think that's a win-win for everyone, regardless of political party.
I agree. I think the return on investment is very, very high. I think there are significant benefits that we've reaped as a result of having this office and implementing the reforms that have grown out of executive.
Well, I appreciate it. When you took the job on, just on a personal note, is it what you expected it to be, Reeve? Did you, when you said, when the governor called and said, "I need you to do this," was this what you expected? And has it fulfilled your dreams?
It's absolutely fulfilled my dreams. Yeah, it's in many ways I think even better than I could have expected. Prior to coming to Richmond, I worked at the federal level, and were in many respects similar to OIRA at the federal level. To my knowledge, there really was not any other state level OIRA, so I really kind of didn't know sort of what to expect when I first started. But and I give a lot of credit to my predecessor Andrew Wheeler as well in terms of when we started, we with the governor's strong support, were able to stand this office up, and I was really quite amazed actually at sort of how quickly, within a matter of a few months, we were able to really put the key materials out there and start working with our agencies to make reductions. So, the process has actually moved a lot faster than I think I could have even anticipated. And, I think that that's great news for Virginia. And then I think it's also great news for, if any other states are interested in replicating this model. It's something where I think it's a process that can move really pretty quickly. And, the benefits to the citizens and the businesses of the state are enormous.
So what advice would you give another state, Reeve, that might be hearing this and saying, "Hey, how do we get in on that?" Just lessons learned of friction had, or opportunities maybe that could have gone better for you. What advice would you give somebody like yourself in, heaven forbid, California or someplace like that might want to do this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think there are some critical pieces of this. One is that you have a clear target. I think, the governor setting a target of 25%, I think was absolutely the right way to do it because that gives the agencies a clear target to work towards. I think another major reason that we've been so successful is once you have that target in place, then I think you need either an office like ours or a dedicated team of some sort that can then work with the agencies to say, here's how you make progress towards this goal. I know there have been past efforts, not in Virginia, but across the country and even in other countries that have not been as successful. And I think part of it is, you have to have sort of a centralized office in place to sort of oversee it. And it doesn't have to be big. Like I said, we're four people. But I think bringing that consistency is really, really critical. And then just working with the agencies day to day. They really do buy into the process, but there are a lot of questions that come up. How do you count regulatory requirements? How do you find the best requirements or the best candidates for
Mhm.
streamlining? One other thing I'll mention briefly is I think, and this is something that really wasn't available to us when we got started, but I think artificial intelligence is going to increasingly play a role in this space. In fact, we're working on a pilot project now using AI to scan regulations. And I think for another state that starts this, they can probably start, with the artificial intelligence at the outset,
Mhm.
and it could probably speed the process up pretty significantly. You don't have to have a human being actually reviewing each regulation.
Yeah, certainly the volume of regulations is daunting to try to go through, Reeve. But I'm telling you, and I don't say this lightly, I sense a consultancy in your future. We need it. Reeve Bohl, Director of the Office of Regulatory Management for now, but let's not push him out the door yet. Thank you for what you've done. Here, let's go for 33%. If you feel like you're going to make 25, let's see if we can't send the governor on his way with 33% saved or somewhere close to it. But thank you for taking some time and have a great morning.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.